The grand piano sat in the corner of the executive lounge, glossy black and rarely touched. Most evenings it was just another piece of expensive furniture that needed dusting. And every night as Ray mopped the marble floors of Westbrook Financial's top floor, his eyes would drift toward it. Tonight was no different. The office had emptied hours ago, leaving behind coffee cups with lipstick marks, crumpled papers that had missed trash cans, and the faint smell of expensive perfume. Ray moved through the silent space like a ghost, the soft squeak of his mop bucket wheels echoing through empty hallways. "You're falling behind schedule again," his supervisor Mike said, poking his head through the doorway. "Daydreaming won't pay the bills." Ray nodded, forcing his eyes away from the piano. "Sorry, I'll pick up the pace." Mike's expression softened slightly. "Listen, I know things are tough since Diane passed, but we've got 3 more floors to do before midnight." When Mike's footsteps faded, Ray allowed himself one more glance at the piano. It wasn't just any piano. It was a Steinway concert grand, probably worth more than what he earned in 3 years. The kind he'd once played in another lifetime, before responsibility and heartbreak had rewritten his story. The cleaning company uniform hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight in the past year, something his father had pointed out during his last visit. "You're working yourself to the bone, son," he'd said, watching Ray's 10-year-old daughter Penny playing in the yard. "She needs you healthy." Ray knew his father was right, but what choice did he have? The hospital bills from Diane's illness had wiped out their savings, and now at 42, he was starting over with nothing but a mountain of debt and a daughter who still cried for her. "Mom at night." The mop slid across the floor, methodically as Ray moved, from the lounge toward the row of executive offices, each one larger than his entire apartment, with views of the city that probably cost more per square foot than he could imagine. He'd learned not to think about it too much. Through the window, rain began to fall, turning the city lights into blurry watercolors. The forecast had predicted storms, which meant Penny would be scared. His daughter hated thunder, another thing that had changed since her mother died. Ray checked his watch. Mrs. Chen from next door would be sitting with Penny until he got home, but he hated being away from her for so long, especially on stormy nights. As he cleaned the CEO's office, Ray noticed a framed photo on the desk, a man in an expensive suit standing beside a woman and 2 teenagers, all smiling on what looked like a yacht, happy, secure, worlds apart from his own reality. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Penny can't sleep. Asking for you." Ray typed back quickly. "Tell her I'll be home soon. Story time when I get there." He worked faster, moving through the remaining offices with practiced efficiency. The building was eerily quiet at night, with only the occasional security guard making rounds. Most people never thought about who cleaned their spaces, who picked up their discarded lunch containers or wiped coffee rings from their desks. To them, it just magically happened between their leaving at night and arriving the next morning. Back in the lounge, Ray finished the floors and began emptying trash bins. The piano called to him again, like an old friend trying to get his attention. He'd managed to avoid looking at it directly until now. But something about tonight, maybe the rain, maybe the text about Penny, weakened his resolve. Setting down his cleaning supplies, Ray approached the piano cautiously as if it might disappear if he moved too quickly. His fingers hovered over the fallboard covering the keys. No one would know if he just looked at them. No one was here. He lifted the cover gently, revealing the perfect row of ivory and ebony. Without thinking, his right hand found a C chord, pressing down so softly that the hammers barely touched the strings. The faint sound hung in the air like a question. Memories flooded back. The music school scholarship. His teacher, Mr. Abramowitz, insisting he had rare talent. The small but appreciative crowds at recitals and later, the restaurant gigs that had helped pay for his and Diane's first apartment. Music had been his identity once. "What are you doing?" Ray jumped, slamming the fallboard shut with a bang that echoed through the empty room. Mike stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I was just dusting it," Ray said, reaching for a cloth. Mike looked skeptical but checked his watch instead of arguing. "We need to finish the 32nd floor. The big shots have some early meeting tomorrow." Ray nodded, gathering his supplies quickly. As they walked to the elevator, Mike gave him a sideways glance. "Didn't know you played?" "I don't," Ray said automatically. "Not anymore." Mike replied, unconvinced. "Well, whatever. Just don't get caught messing with their stuff." They fired a guy last year for using the gym after hours. The elevator descended, numbers flashing as they dropped through the building. Ray's mind was still upstairs with the piano, his fingers tingling with muscle memory. He flexed them unconsciously. By the time they finished the last floor, it was nearly 1 a.m. Rain was coming down harder now, and Ray's shoes leaked as he splashed through puddles to the bus stop. The city looked different at night, less intimidating somehow, with the office towers dark except for the occasional light where another night worker kept their own lonely vigil. The bus was nearly empty. Ray sat near the back, resting his head against the window, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. His reflection looked back at him, a tired man with shadows under his eyes and 3 days of stubble. Not exactly the image of the promising young musician he'd once been. His apartment building came into view, a worn brick structure that had seen better days. The elevator was broken again, so Ray climbed 6 flights of stairs, his legs burning with each step. At least the exercise kept him warm. Mrs. Chen opened the door before he could put his key in the lock. The elderly woman had been a godsend since Diane passed, watching Penny whenever Ray had night shifts. She just fell asleep 20 minutes ago, Mrs. Chen whispered. Poor thing was fighting it, wanted to wait for you. Thank you, Ray said, pulling out his wallet to pay her, but she waved him off as usual. Save it for something special for Penny, she said. That child needs some joy. After Mrs. Chen left, Ray quietly entered Penny's small bedroom. Glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the ceiling, a weekend project they'd done together to help with her fear of the dark. Penny lay curled up with her stuffed elephant, her mother's old scarf clutched in one hand. Even in sleep, she held on to what remained of Diane. Ray gently brushed a strand of hair from his daughter's face. She looked so much like her mother, the same dark curls, the same determined chin. Sometimes it hurt to look at her, but it was a sweet kind of pain, a reminder that part of Diane lived on. He kissed Penny's forehead and whispered, I love you, sunshine, back in the living room, which doubled as his bedroom. Ray unfolded the sofa bed as quietly as possible. His body ached from hours of mopping and scrubbing, but his mind was strangely alert. The piano at Westbrook kept appearing in his thoughts. On the small bookshelf beside the sofa bed, hidden behind a row of Penny's school books, sat a worn folder of sheet music. Ray hadn't opened it since the funeral. Tonight, something compelled him to pull it out. Inside were pages of compositions, some published pieces he'd once performed, others his own creations. His fingers traced the notes on the page, hearing the music in his head even without a piano to play it on. The last piece in the folder was incomplete, a lullaby he'd started writing when Diane was pregnant. He'd meant to finish it as a gift after Penny was born, but life had gotten busy with a newborn, and then years had passed, and then Diane got sick. And somehow the music had stopped. Ray stared at the unfinished piece for a long time. The rain continued to drum against the windows, providing a rhythm to his thoughts. Before sleep finally claimed him, he made a decision. He would finish Penny's lullaby. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. He fell asleep with the sheet music on his chest, dreaming of black and white keys and a time when music had been as natural to him as breathing. In his dreams, he played the grand piano at Westbrook Financial, but instead of an empty room, Penny and Diane were there, listening, smiling. And for the first time in months, it was a dream he didn't want to wake from. The next morning arrived too quickly. Ray's alarm blared at 6 a.m. and he fumbled to silence it before it woke Penny. His back ached from the pull-out couch, a daily reminder that he'd given up the bedroom to his daughter. Worth every twinge, he thought as he stretched and winced. Dad? Penny stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her wild curls pointed in every direction, and she clutched her stuffed elephant under one arm. Hey, sunshine. Sorry if I woke you. Ray patted the space beside him, and she climbed onto the sofa bed, bringing with her the smell of sleep and the strawberry shampoo they'd splurged on last month. You came home super late, she said, leaning against his shoulder. I know. Big building, lots of floors. He kissed the top of her head. But I'm here now. Ready for breakfast? They moved through their morning routine with practiced efficiency. Ray made oatmeal while Penny brushed her teeth. They ate together at their small kitchen table, a yard sale find they'd repainted together. As they ate, Ray checked over Penny's homework. Math had never been his strong suit, but he'd gotten better at fourth-grade fractions through sheer determination. Mrs. Wilson says I play really well, Penny said suddenly, stirring her oatmeal. Ray looked up. What's that? The piano. At school. Mrs. Wilson lets me practice during lunch sometimes. She watched him carefully. She says I have talent. Something caught in Ray's throat that wasn't oatmeal. That's wonderful, honey. Mom said you used to be really good. Like really, really good. Ray set down his spoon. Diane had always been the one to talk about his past with music. He'd avoided the subject, finding it too painful after giving it up. Your mom liked to exaggerate. No, she didn't. Penny's expression turned serious beyond her years. She showed me videos. From before I was born. Ray was startled. Videos? What videos? On her old laptop. There's one where you're playing in a big room with lots of people listening. Mom said it was a competition. She sounded out the word carefully. Ray remembered that day, the Western Regional Piano Championship. He'd placed second, missing first by just 2 points. The winner had gone on to Juilliard. Ray had gotten a partial scholarship to a smaller conservatory. But then Diane got pregnant and his father had his first heart attack. And suddenly practical matters took priority over musical dreams. That was a long time ago, sunshine. Could you teach me? Not just the easy stuff, but the hard songs you used to play? The school bus honked outside, saving Ray from answering. That's your ride. Better hurry. Penny grabbed her backpack but paused at the door. Think about it, okay, Dad, please? After she left, Ray sat alone at the table, the apartment suddenly too quiet. Penny's question had cracked open a door he'd kept firmly shut. Could he teach her? Did he even remember enough? And worse, could he bear to reopen that part of himself? His phone buzzed with a text from his second job. The convenience store needed him to cover an afternoon shift. That meant rushing from there directly to the cleaning job with barely time to check in on Penny at Mrs. Chen's. Ray sighed, putting his bowl in the sink. No time for musical ghosts today. The convenience store shift dragged. Ray restocked shelves, rang up customers, and mopped spills while fighting yawns. By the time he clocked out at 7 p.m., his feet already ached and his night job hadn't even started. He called Mrs. Chen from the bus. How's Penny doing? Homework's done. She's eating dinner now. Want to talk to her? Penny's voice came through the phone a moment later. Dad, guess what? Mrs. Wilson says there's a school talent show next month. Can I play piano in it, please? Ray closed his eyes, suddenly overwhelmed. We'll talk about it when I get home, okay? Be good for Mrs. Chen. At Westbrook Financial, the night shift began as usual. Ray changed into his uniform in the basement locker room while Mike handed out assignments. Big news, Mike announced to the cleaning crew. Company's throwing some fancy party next week. 35th floor. CEO's showing off for investors or something. He pointed at Ray. You and Lee are on special duty that night. They want extra hands to keep things tidy during the event. Ray nodded, mentally calculating how this would affect his schedule with Penny. As if reading his thoughts, Mike added, It pays time and a half, plus you might score some leftover fancy food. The extra money would help with Penny's school supplies. She needed new shoes too. Kids grew so fast. As he pushed his cart onto the elevator, Ray found himself thinking about the piano again. Working during this party meant he might actually see someone play it. For some reason, the thought both excited and troubled him. The upper floors were busier than usual tonight. Even at 9 p.m., lights burned in several offices. Executive assistants hurried around with binders and coffee cups. The approaching investor event had everyone working late. Ray kept his head down, focusing on his tasks. He'd learned that invisibility was an art form in places like this. The right pace, the right posture, the careful avoidance of eye contact, all techniques. To fade into the background of busy lives, he was emptying trash bins in the marketing department when a sharp voice cut through his concentration. Excuse me, you cleaning person. Ray looked up to see a woman standing in a doorway. Her sleek bob haircut framed a face sharp with impatience. The nameplate on her door read Vanessa Harper, Marketing Director. Yes, ma'am. Ray straightened, instinctively pulling his cart aside. There's coffee spilled all over my conference room. We have a presentation in there first thing tomorrow. I'll take care of it right away, Ray said, reaching for his supplies. The conference room was a mess. Not just coffee, but half-eaten sandwiches and scattered papers. A meeting had clearly ended abruptly, with no one bothering to clean up after themselves. As Ray worked, he could hear voices from the adjacent office. Vanessa Harper was speaking to someone, her tone casual and slightly amused. Almost finished with the presentation for the gala. Harrington wants everything perfect. You know how he gets about these investor events? A man's voice responded, too low for Ray to make out the words. I know. Vanessa continued, louder now as she approached the conference room door. The whole evening is planned down to the minute. Speeches, dinner, then some classical quartet for background music while everyone mingles. She appeared in the doorway with a man Ray recognized as one of the vice presidents. They both paused when they saw Ray on his hands and knees scrubbing the carpet. Almost done here, Ray said quietly. Vanessa barely glanced at him. The quartet canceled, she was saying to her colleague. Something about their cellist breaking a wrist. Now we're scrambling to find replacement entertainment. What about that piano in the lounge? The man suggested. It's just gathering dust. Get someone to play it. On 3 days' notice? Where am I going to find a decent pianist who's available and affordable? Vanessa sighed dramatically. That piano is just for show anyway. Harrington's wife insisted on it during the last renovation. I doubt it's even in tune. Ray kept his eyes on his work, but his heart had begun beating faster. The piano. They needed someone to play the piano. You're all set, he said, standing up with his cleaning supplies. The stain should be completely gone by morning. Vanessa glanced at the now clean carpet with mild surprise, as if she'd forgotten he was there. Oh, right, thank you. As Ray pushed his cart toward the door, something made him stop. His hands tightened on the handle. Before he could reconsider, he heard himself speak. The piano was in tune. Both executives turned to look at him, startled. I beg your pardon? Vanessa said. Ray swallowed hard. The piano? In the lounge. It's in tune. They have it serviced every 6 months. I've seen the tuner come in. Vanessa blinked, clearly surprised at being addressed. And you know this because? I clean the executive floor. Ray hesitated, then added, I used to play. Piano, I mean. The vice president laughed, a short bark of amusement. Well, there's your solution, Vanessa. Hire the janitor to entertain our millionaire guests. Ray felt heat rise to his face. He should have kept quiet. What was he thinking? Vanessa was looking at him more carefully now, head tilted slightly. You used to play? What does that mean exactly? Like Christmas carols and chopsticks? The dismissive tone sparked something in Ray. A flicker of the pride he'd once had in his abilities. I studied at Eastern Conservatory. I've performed Rachmaninoff, Chopin, Liszt. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Is that so? The vice president was still smirking. Come on, Vanessa. You can't be serious. But Vanessa kept her eyes on Ray. What's your name? Ray. Ray Mercer. Well, Ray Mercer, former conservatory student, she said, her voice dripping with skepticism. Why don't you prove it? Tomorrow, noon. In the lounge. She smiled thinly. Play something impressive and maybe, just maybe, we won't have to scramble for last-minute entertainment. After they walked away, Ray stood frozen, cart handle still gripped tightly in his hands. What had he just done? What had possessed him to speak up like that? On the bus ride home that night, exhaustion competed with anxiety. He hadn't touched a piano properly in years. His fingers were calloused from work now, not nimble from practice. And yet, Mrs. Chen was dozing on the couch when he finally made it home. Penny was asleep in her room, school books neatly stacked on her small desk. Ray thanked Mrs. Chen and saw her out, then stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. On her bedside table sat a photo of Diane, smiling from behind a piano, her pregnant belly visible under the keyboard. It had been taken at their friend's house the last time Ray had played regularly. What am I doing, Di? He whispered to the photo. I'm going to make a fool of myself. In her sleep, Penny turned over, hugging her elephant closer. Ray thought about her question that morning, about the talent show, about him teaching her, about a legacy of music he'd almost let slip away. He quietly closed her door and went to the bookshelf. The folder of sheet music was still there from the night before. He pulled it out and spread the pages on the coffee table, staring at notes that had once been as familiar to him as his own name. Midnight came and went as Ray sat on the floor of his tiny living room, fingers moving silently over the coffee table as if it were a keyboard, muscle memory slowly, painfully returning. Tomorrow at noon he would either rediscover a piece of himself long buried or confirm that it was gone forever. Morning arrived with Ray still on the living room floor, Sheet music scattered around him. He'd dozed off sometime after 3 a.m., his back against the couch, fingers stiff from hours of silent practice. The alarm on his phone jolted him awake. "Dad? Why are you sleeping on the floor?" Penny stood over him in her pajamas, head tilted in confusion. Ray groaned as he straightened his neck. "Just fell asleep working on something," he mumbled, gathering the music sheets before she could see them. Today's challenge was his burden alone. No need to get her hopes up if he failed miserably. Breakfast was a rushed affair. Ray's mind kept drifting to the noon appointment while he packed Penny's lunch. What piece should he play? Something technical to prove his skill? Something emotional? His hands felt clumsy as he spread peanut butter on bread. "You're acting weird," Penny observed, watching him over her cereal bowl. "Are you okay?" "Just tired, sunshine." He forced a smile. "Big day at work. Can I still tell you about the talent show tonight?" Ray nodded, guilt twisting his stomach. "Absolutely. I promise." After seeing Penny off to school, Ray called the convenience store. "Family emergency," he claimed, hating the lie but seeing no alternative. He couldn't miss this opportunity, not just for a potential gig, but for something more important, reclaiming a piece of himself. He spent the morning warming up his hands with exercises he hadn't done in years, using the kitchen counter as a makeshift keyboard. Muscle memory was a strange thing. His fingers remembered patterns his conscious mind had forgotten, like reuniting with an old friend. At 11:15, Ray caught the bus to Westbrook Financial, wearing the only decent clothes he owned, black pants and a navy button-down shirt Diane had given him years ago. No tie, but at least he looked presentable, not like a janitor, he thought, then immediately felt ashamed. There was no shame in honest work. The daytime security guard gave him an odd look as he signed in. "You're not on shift till tonight." Meeting with HR, Ray lied again, the words bitter on his tongue. 2 lies in one day, more than he'd told in the past year. The executive floor felt different in daylight. Busier, brighter, filled with purposeful energy. Ray felt painfully out of place as he made his way to the lounge, aware of curious glances from passing employees who recognized him from his evening role. The lounge was empty when he arrived, the piano waiting silently by the window. Ray approached it slowly, reverently. In the daylight, he could see details he'd missed during his night shifts. Tiny scratches in the glossy finish, wear marks on the bench, signs that this instrument had once been played regularly, not just displayed. He sat down and lifted the fallboard. The keys gleamed up at him, perfectly maintained despite their disuse. Ray placed his hands in position, not yet pressing down, just feeling the cool ivory beneath his fingertips. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Well, you showed up." "I'm surprised." Ray's eyes snapped open. Vanessa stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression skeptical. Behind her were 3 other people. The vice president from last night, a younger woman with a tablet, and an older man Ray recognized as Thomas Harrington. The CEO of Westbrook Financial. Ray stood quickly, almost knocking over the piano bench. Yes. Thank you for the opportunity." Vanessa checked her watch. "We have exactly 15 minutes before our next meeting. That should be plenty of time to settle this experiment." Her tone made it clear she expected disappointment. Ray sat back down, heart hammering against his ribs. The presence of the CEO hadn't been part of his calculations. He'd imagined playing for Vanessa alone, maybe 1 or 2 others, not the most powerful person in the building. "Whenever you're ready," Vanessa prompted, her impatience evident. Ray placed his hands on the keys again. What to play? He'd cycled through options all night. Chopin's Revolutionary Etude to show technical skill? A Beethoven sonata for gravitas? In the end, he'd settled on Debussy's Clair de Lune. Beautiful but challenging. Emotional yet refined. But now, with these people watching him, with all that had happened in the past 10 years, with Penny's face in his mind and Diane's memory in his heart, none of those choices felt right. Instead, his fingers found the opening notes of his own unfinished composition, Penny's Lullaby. The piece he'd started writing when Diane was pregnant and never completed. The notes came hesitantly at first, like a voice unused to speaking, but grew stronger with each measure. The melody was simple, but haunting, written to tell the story of hopes and dreams for a child not yet born. Ray had composed it during a time of pure joy, before life's complications had intervened. As he played, he found himself adding new phrases, the music evolving to include the pain of loss, the struggle of recent years. but also the enduring love for his daughter. He forgot his audience. Forgot the grand office building and the executives watching him. Forgot that he was supposed to be proving something. There was only the music, his music, flowing from some deep place inside him that had remained untouched by hardship. When the final notes faded, Ray sat motionless, eyes closed, caught in the spell of his own creation. The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly until someone cleared their throat. Ray looked up, suddenly remembering where he was and why. The small audience stood perfectly still. Vanessa's arms had uncrossed, her expression unreadable. The assistant clutched her tablet to her chest, blinking rapidly. But it was Harrington, the CEO, who spoke first. "What was that piece?" His voice was gruff, controlled, but something in his eyes had changed. "Something I wrote," Ray answered quietly. "For my daughter. Before she was born." "You composed that?" Vanessa asked, genuine surprise replacing her earlier skepticism. Ray nodded, unsure what else to say. Harrington stepped forward. "I've heard a lot of pianists in my time, young man. My mother was a concert pianist before I was born. Taught at Juilliard for 40 years. He paused, and Ray noticed a slight tremor in the older man's hand. "She would have approved of your playing." "Thank you, sir. You work for our cleaning service, correct?" Harrington asked. "Yes, sir. Night shift for about a year now." Harrington turned to Vanessa. "I think we've found our entertainment for the gala, wouldn't you say?" Vanessa seemed to recover her composure. "Yes, of course, if he's available." "I am," Ray said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "I mean, I'd be honored." "Good. Settled then." Harrington nodded crisply. "My assistant will work out the details with you." He turned to leave, then paused. "That piece you played, does it have a name?" Ray hesitated. "It's called Penny's Lullaby, after my daughter." "Finish it," Harrington said simply. "It deserves an ending." Then he was gone, leaving Ray stunned on the piano bench. The young assistant approached with her tablet. "I'll need your contact information, Mr. Mercer." "Ray Mercer." As he provided his details, Ray noticed Vanessa watching him with newfound interest. "Where did you study again?" she asked. "Eastern Conservatory. For 2 years. And then?" Ray's hands rested on the closed piano lid. "Life happened. My wife got pregnant. My father got sick. Bills needed paying." He shrugged. "Music became a luxury I couldn't afford." Something flickered across Vanessa's face. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. "The gala pays $500 for the evening. 2 hours of playing, with breaks. Think you can handle that?" $500. That was almost a month's worth of groceries. Or new shoes for Penny and money toward her school trip. Or partial payment on one of Diane's remaining medical bills. "Yes," he said firmly. "I can handle it." Ray floated through the rest of the day. He called Mike to explain he couldn't work the night shift using the truth this time. He'd been hired to play piano for the company gala. Mike's disbelief gradually gave way to congratulations. "No kidding? Well, don't forget us little people when you're famous," he joked. By afternoon, Ray was at the elementary school, waiting for Penny. When she bounded down the steps, pigtails bouncing, he scooped her up in a hug that lifted her off the ground. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she laughed, surprised by his unusual presence and obvious good mood. "I took the night off," he said, setting her down. "I thought we could do something special." "Like what?" Ray took her hand as they walked. "Well, first you can tell me all about this talent show at school." Penny's eyes widened. "Really? So I can do it?" "Not only can you do it, but I'm going to help you practice. In fact," Ray squeezed her hand, "I have a surprise. Remember how you asked if I could teach you the hard songs I used to play?" She nodded eagerly. "I think it's time I showed you what those songs sound like. There's a music store downtown with practice rooms. What do you say we go try one out?" Penny's shriek of delight turned heads on the sidewalk. "You're going to play? For real? Like in the videos?" "I played today, actually," Ray admitted, still hardly believing it himself. "At work. And they asked me to play at a special event." "You're going to be on a stage again? Like a real pianist?" Ray laughed. "Not exactly a stage, but yes, like a real pianist." As they boarded the bus to downtown, Penny bombarded him with questions about what he'd played, who had listened, how it had felt. Ray answered them all, watching his daughter's face light up with each response. Something warm unfurled in his chest. Pride, yes, but also connection. For the first time in years, he was sharing this part of himself with her. At the music store, the owner recognized something in Ray's demeanor. The way he approached the upright piano in the practice room, perhaps, or how his hands hovered reverently over the keys. He gave them an extra half-hour free of charge. "Talent should be encouraged," he said with a wink to Penny. For 2 magical hours, Ray played for his daughter. Chopin preludes, Mozart sonatas, and finally the unfinished lullaby. Penny sat beside him on the bench, utterly transfixed. "That last one," she whispered when he finished. "It feels like home." Ray wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "That's because it is. I wrote it for you before you were born. You made that up? All by yourself?" "I did, and I think it's time I finished it." On the bus ride home, Penny leaned against him, unusually quiet. Finally, she asked, "Dad, are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about the day, about the piano at Westbrook, about the music that had lain dormant inside him for too long. "Yeah, sunshine," he said, realizing it was true. "Today I'm really happy. Mom would be happy too," Penny said softly. "She always said you were magic when you played." Ray's throat tightened. "Your mom was the real magic," he managed to say. "And so are you." That night, after Penny was asleep, Ray sat at their small kitchen table with blank sheet music he'd purchased at the store. His pencil moved across the page, adding notes, building phrases. The ending of Penny's lullaby finally taking shape after all these years. In 3 days, he would play for a room full of wealthy strangers. But tonight he composed for the 2 people who mattered most: his daughter, asleep down the hall, and Diane, whose memory seemed to guide his hand as the music flowed onto the page. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ray practiced whenever he could, during his lunch break at the convenience store, at the music shop after Penny's school day, and silently at night after she'd gone to bed, his fingers moving over the kitchen table. The muscle memory returned more quickly than he'd expected, like his hands had been waiting all these years to find their purpose again. The night of the gala arrived with unexpected nerves. Ray stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the tie he'd borrowed from his neighbor, Mr. Patel. The suit was second-hand, purchased yesterday from a thrift store, a little loose in places but clean and presentable. Ray barely recognized himself. "You look like a movie star," Penny said from the doorway, eyes wide with admiration. Ray laughed. "I look like a janitor in a borrowed suit." "Nuh-uh. You look like a famous pianist. Like in Mom's videos." Mrs. Chen arrived to watch Penny, bringing homemade cookies as a celebration. "For after your big performance," she told Ray, "my nephew plays violin in the symphony. I know how musicians get hungry after shows." Ray knelt to hug Penny goodbye. "Be good for Mrs. Chen. I'll tell you everything tomorrow." Penny held him tightly. "Play our song, okay?" "The lullaby." "I will," he promised. "Just for you." Westbrook Financial looked different at night when lit for an event. The normally sterile office building had transformed. Subtle lighting, floral arrangement, staff in black uniforms carrying trays of appetizers. Ray entered through the employee entrance, directed by security to a service elevator that would take him to the 35th floor. In the elevator, he checked his phone. No messages from Mrs. Chen, which meant Penny was fine. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm his racing heart. Just a 2-hour performance, he reminded himself. He'd done longer recitals in school, but that had been a decade ago, before calluses from mop handles had replaced calluses from hours of practice, before responsibility and grief had pushed music aside, before tonight had come to mean so much more than just a paycheck. The elevator doors opened directly into a service area where catering staff bustled about. A young woman with a clipboard spotted him. "Mr. Mercer? The pianist?" Ray nodded, suddenly unable to find his voice. "This way, please. The piano is ready in the main lounge. You'll start when guests begin arriving for cocktails." Around 7:30, she led him through a back hallway, explaining the schedule, gentle background music during drinks and mingling, a break during the CEO's speech, then more playing during dinner. Ray followed her, taking mental notes while his eyes darted around the transformed space. The offices and cubicles he usually cleaned were hidden behind temporary walls, creating an elegant venue he barely recognized. And then he saw it. The piano had been moved to a small raised platform near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. No longer tucked away in the corner, it commanded attention, gleaming under soft spotlights. "You can warm up now if you'd like," the assistant said, Guests won't arrive for another 20 minutes. Left alone, Ray approached the instrument with a reverence that surprised even him. This was really happening. He sat at the bench, adjusting its height, then placed his hands on the keys. A few quiet scales to start, then arpeggios, feeling the action of the keys, the responsiveness. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice someone approaching until a voice spoke. The piano was my mother's. Ray's hands froze mid-phrase. CEO Harrington stood nearby, already dressed in a tuxedo for the evening, drink in hand. Sir, the Steinway. It belonged to my mother. Harrington moved closer, eyes on the instrument rather than Ray. When she passed, I couldn't bear to sell it, but couldn't keep it at home either. Too many memories. He took a sip of his drink. So it came here where mostly it's been ignored. Until you. Ray wasn't sure how to respond. It's a beautiful instrument. Yes. Harrington seemed lost in thought. My mother would play Chopin when I was a boy. I'd lie under the piano, feeling the music vibrate through the floor. His eyes refocused on Ray. Your daughter, Penny, was it? Does she play? She's learning. At school, Harrington nodded. Good. Music is a gift that stays with you even when you think you've left it behind. He straightened, businessman persona returning. The folder on the piano contains requests from some of our major donors. Standard classics, nothing too challenging for someone of your training. Feel free to mix in your own selections as well. Ray glanced at the leather folder he hadn't noticed before. Thank you. Harrington turned to leave, then paused. That piece you played at the audition. Will we hear it tonight? Yes, sir. I've finished it now. Good. A ghost of a smile touched the older man's face. I look forward to it. As Harrington walked away, Ray opened the folder. Inside was a list of crowd pleasers. Some Debussy, light Beethoven, Gershwin, even a few contemporary pieces arranged for piano. Easy enough. He flipped through sheet music provided for each request, relief washing over him. This was manageable. He didn't notice Vanessa approach until she spoke. Quite the change from mopping floors, isn't it? Ray looked up. The marketing director wore a sleek black dress, her usual sharpness softened somewhat for the evening. Yes, ma'am. She winced slightly. Please don't call me ma'am, it's Vanessa. She glanced around the rapidly filling room. I owe you an apology for my attitude earlier this week. I made assumptions based on your job. Ray shook his head. No apology needed. It wasn't a fair assumption, but it was a natural one. Still, I was wrong, and I'm glad I was. She smiled, surprising him with its genuineness. Break a leg tonight, maestro. These investors pay our salaries, so make us look good. Guests began streaming in. Men in expensive suits, women in cocktail dresses, all exuding the casual confidence of wealth. Ray straightened his borrowed tie, took a deep breath, and began to play. He started with Debussy's Arabesque, light, flowing, perfect as background music. His fingers found their rhythm quickly, muscle memory taking over as he settled into the performance. A few heads turned his way with approving nods, but mostly he remained pleasantly unnoticed, exactly as good background music should be. As the room filled, Ray transitioned to more familiar pieces, a gentle Mozart sonata, some Chopin nocturnes. He kept the mood sophisticated but unobtrusive, watching the crowd from his peripheral vision. These were the people whose offices he cleaned every night, whose coffee cups and takeout containers he threw away, whose lives seemed so removed from his own. Yet tonight, he provided the soundtrack to their evening. There was a strange power in that realization. An hour passed. Ray moved through the requested pieces, adding his own selections when appropriate. His hands, which had ached with uncertainty during practice, now felt fluid and confident. It was like reconnecting with an old friend, awkward at first, then suddenly as comfortable as if no time had passed. During his break, while Harrington gave a speech about quarterly projections and investment opportunities, Ray slipped away to the restroom. As he washed his hands, he caught his reflection in the mirror. The borrowed suit, the slicked-back hair, he looked the part of the professional musician. But his eyes held something new, something like peace. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Penny still awake. Wants to know if you played her song yet. Ray smiled, typing back. Not yet, soon. Tell her I love her. When he returned to the piano, the speech had ended, and dinner was being served. The atmosphere had shifted, less mingling, more seated conversations. Ray adjusted his selections accordingly, playing softer, more contemplative pieces as waiters served expensive meals. Halfway through a satie piece, he noticed Harrington approaching with an elderly man. The CEO gestured toward Ray without interrupting his playing. "Discovered him quite by accident," Ray overheard Harrington saying. "Worked for our cleaning service. Classically trained." The older man leaned on a cane, watching Ray's hands with obvious appreciation. When the piece ended, Harrington made introductions. "Mr. Mercer, this is Harold Winters, one of our oldest clients and a great supporter of the arts. He was just commenting on your playing." Ray stood to shake the man's hand. "Thank you, sir." "Exquisite touch," Winters said, his voice frail but his eyes sharp. "You've studied seriously?" "Yes, sir. Eastern Conservatory years ago. And now you clean offices?" The old man looked genuinely puzzled, not condescending. Ray hesitated. "Life took a different turn than I expected." "Life often does," Winters nodded sagely. "But music has a way of finding its path back to those who truly need it." He turned to Harrington. "The foundation might be interested in this young man. Have him call my office." After they walked away, Ray sat in stunned silence. Had he just been offered some kind of opportunity? Before he could process it, Vanessa appeared at his side. "Whatever Winters just said to you, take it seriously," she whispered. "His foundation funds half the arts programs in the city." Ray nodded, still processing. "I will." "We're moving to dessert soon," Vanessa continued. "Harrington mentioned you have a special piece to play. Something original?" "Yes, a lullaby I composed for my daughter." "Perfect timing. The room's getting sleepy after all that wine and heavy food. Play it in about 10 minutes." She squeezed his shoulder lightly before walking away. Ray took a deep breath, preparing himself. He'd practiced the completed lullaby countless times over the past few days, working out the ending that had eluded him for years. But playing it here in this room for these people, it felt both terrifying and exactly right. When the moment came, Ray positioned his hands above the keys and hesitated. Then he thought of Penny at home, waiting to hear if he'd played their song. He thought of Diane, who had always believed in his music, even when he'd stopped believing in it himself. "This next piece is one I composed," he announced quietly, surprising himself with the public statement. "It's called Penny's Lullaby, named for my daughter." And then he began to play. The opening notes were gentle, questioning, full of the wonder and anticipation of impending fatherhood. The middle section, which he'd played at his audition, spoke of love and loss, the joy of Penny's birth, the devastation of Diane's illness, the struggle of the years that followed. But the new ending, the part he'd finally written this week, transformed the piece. It spoke of resilience, of finding beauty amid hardship, of a love that transcends circumstance. The melody soared with hope without denying the pain that came before it. Ray poured everything into those final phrases, his gratitude for Penny, his memories of Diane, his rediscovered passion for music, and the unexpected second chance this night represented. The last notes hung in the air like a blessing, a promise, a new beginning. When he finished, the room remained silent. Ray kept his eyes closed, afraid to break the spell. Then somewhere behind him a sound, a single sniffle quickly stifled. He turned to find Harrington standing nearby, one hand covering his mouth, the other gripping the back of a chair. The CEO's eyes glistened in the soft lighting. Across the room, conversations had stopped. Waiters stood frozen with dessert trays. Every face had turned toward the piano. And then, like a wave breaking, applause filled the room. Not polite background music applause, but real, genuine appreciation. People rose to their feet, napkins dabbed at eyes, and Ray sat stunned as the moment washed over him. In the midst of the standing ovation, he felt his phone buzz in his pocket. Without checking, he knew it was Mrs. Chen, telling him that somehow across the city Penny had felt her lullaby finally come to its completion. Ray couldn't sleep that night. Even after the gala ended, after he'd collected his payment envelope with a surprising bonus included, after the late bus ride home where he'd sat in stunned silence watching the city lights blur past his window, even then, lying on his pull-out couch with the sounds of the building settling around him, sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying moments from the evening, the applause that had followed his lullaby, the handshakes from guests who'd sought him out afterward, the business cards pressed into his palm with murmured invitations to call my office or send us your information. Most vivid was the memory of Harrington's face, the stern CEO overcome with emotion and his words afterward. You've woken something up in this place. In all of us. Ray turned onto his side, watching moonlight filter through the thin curtains. What did it all mean? Was this just one magical night before returning to reality? Or the beginning of something new? And if it was something new, what would that mean for him and Penny? His phone showed 3:17 a.m. when he finally drifted off, still wearing his dress shirt, the borrowed tie draped across the arm of the couch. He awoke to small fingers poking his shoulder and the smell of slightly burnt toast. Dad, wake up, Mrs. Chen's making breakfast and I helped. Ray opened his eyes to find Penny's face inches from his own, her eyes bright with excitement. What time is it? Almost 9. You were super asleep. She tugged at his arm. Come on, I want to hear about everything. In the tiny kitchen, Mrs. Chen stood at the stove, turning bacon. She smiled when she saw Ray's rumpled appearance. The artist emerges. Sit. You need food after your big night. Ray rubbed his face, still half in last night's dream world. You didn't have to stay, Mrs. Chen. I'm sorry I got back so late. Nonsense. The little one and I had a good time. She taught me to play Go Fish. Mrs. Chen set a plate of bacon and eggs in front of him. Now eat and tell us everything. Between bites, Ray described the gala, the fancy decorations, the important guests, the food he'd glimpsed but hadn't tasted. Penny listened with rapt attention, especially when he described playing her lullaby. And then what happened? She asked, breathless with anticipation. Well, when I finished playing, everyone was very quiet. And then, Ray paused for dramatic effect. They all stood up and clapped. For a long time, Penny's eyes widened. Standing ovation. Like in the movies. Just like that, Ray agreed, still hardly believing it himself. And the boss man cried? Really, he did. He tried to hide it, but yes. Penny looked thoughtful. Because the music was so beautiful? Ray considered this. Maybe. Or maybe because it reminded him of something or someone from his own life. After breakfast, Mrs. Chen headed home, refusing payment once again. Consider it my investment in your new music career, she said with a wink. Once they were alone, Ray noticed Penny hovering near the bookshelf where he kept his old sheet music. Can we go play piano again today? At the music store? Absolutely. But first, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope with his payment. Let's see what we've got here. He counted out the bills. $500 as promised, plus an extra $200 with a note that simply read, bonus for exceptional performance, VH $700. More than a week's combined wages from his 2 jobs. Is that a lot? Penny asked, watching his face. It's helpful, Ray said carefully. It means we can get those new shoes you need. And maybe something else too. Penny's face lit up. Like what? Ray hesitated only briefly. What would you think about a keyboard? Not a big piano, but something you could practice on at home? Better than the school piano? Penny's shriek of delight was answer enough. She threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him off balance. Really, our own piano? A keyboard, Ray corrected, laughing. A digital one. But yes, our own. The music store owner recognized them from their practice sessions earlier that week. When Ray explained what they were looking for, he showed them several options, finally settling on a used 88-key digital piano that fit their budget. It's a few years old, but the touch sensitivity is good. And it's got weighted keys. Important for proper technique, he explained, letting Penny try it out. I can throw in headphones too, so she can practice without disturbing neighbors. As they completed the purchase, Ray's phone rang, an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Is this Ray Mercer? A woman's crisp voice came through the line. Yes. Speaking. This is Grace Winters calling from the Winters Foundation for the Arts. My father, Harold Winters, met you last night at the Westbrook financial event. Ray's heart jumped. Yes, of course. He was quite impressed with your playing, Mr. Mercer, particularly your original composition. She paused. We'd like to discuss an opportunity with you, if you're available to come to our office Monday morning. Ray looked at Penny, who was happily exploring the sounds on her new keyboard, oblivious to the conversation that might be changing their lives. I can be there. What time? After getting the details, Ray hung up, still stunned. The music store owner raised his eyebrows. Good news? I think so. Possibly very good news. The weekend passed in a blur of music. The keyboard took center place in their small living room, and both Ray and Penny spent hours exploring it. Ray showed her proper hand positioning, basic scales, the beginning of simple pieces. She soaked it all up like a sponge, her natural ability obvious even to the neighbors who knocked on the door to ask about the beautiful sounds coming from their apartment. By Sunday evening, Ray had made a decision. He called Mike at the cleaning company. "I need to cut back my hours," he explained. "Maybe just 3 nights a week instead of 5. Mike sighed. "The piano gig is turning into something real, huh?" "I think it might be. I'm not sure yet, but I need to find out. Can't blame you. That talent would be wasted on mop handles." Mike's voice softened. "My sister's a teacher. She always says people should do what lights them up inside. Sounds like you found that again." Next, Ray called his boss at the convenience store with the same message. 2 jobs would become part-time positions, creating space for whatever might be coming next. Monday morning found Ray once again in his borrowed suit, this time sitting in the elegant waiting room of the Winters Foundation. The office occupied the top floor of a downtown building almost as impressive as Westbrook Financial. Awards and framed concert programs lined the walls, along with photographs of smiling children holding instruments. "Mr. Mercer?" A secretary appeared. "They're ready for you now." Ray was led into a conference room where 3 people waited. Harold Winters from the gala, a middle-aged woman he assumed was Grace, and a younger man with glasses who was introduced as the foundation's program director. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Mercer," Harold said, gesturing to a chair. "We've been discussing you quite enthusiastically." Ray sat, trying to calm his nerves. "I'm honored, sir." Grace opened a folder. "Your performance at Westbrook was quite impressive, especially considering your unusual path. Father tells me you studied at Eastern Conservatory but didn't complete your degree." "That's right. Personal circumstances interrupted my education. And now you work as a janitor?" Ray straightened slightly. "A cleaner at Westbrook, yes. And at a convenience store during the day. I'm a single father." Harold nodded approvingly. "No shame in honest work, Grace. But talent like Mr. Mercer's deserves cultivation." "Agreed." Grace turned back to Ray. "Our foundation has several programs that might interest you. The first is a scholarship fund for working artists, those who demonstrate exceptional ability but face financial barriers. It provides stipends to allow time for creative work." Ray's pulse quickened. "That sounds incredible." Additionally, the program director added, "We sponsor community music education in underserved neighborhoods. We need instructors who can connect with students who might not see themselves as traditional musicians." "Like the kids at Penny's school," Ray murmured, almost to himself. "Precisely." Harold's eyes twinkled. "Both programs would provide steady income. Not fortune-making, but stable. And both would allow you to reclaim your musical identity while building something new." "Why me?" Ray asked suddenly. "You must meet talented musicians all the time." Harold and Grace exchanged glances. "Your lullaby," Harold said simply. "It wasn't just technically proficient. It told a story that moved everyone in that room." "That's rare, Mr. Mercer. Very rare." Ray left the foundation with application forms, brochures, and a head spinning with possibilities. They'd been clear. Nothing was guaranteed yet. But the path forward had suddenly appeared where before there had been only dead ends. He walked through the city, barely noticing where his feet took him until he found himself outside Westbrook Financial, looking up at the towering building. He remembered his first day there a year ago, mop in hand, grateful for steady night work that let him be with Penny during the day. He'd never imagined then that the building contained a piano that would change everything. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "How did meeting go?" Ray smiled, typing back, "Very well. Tell you everything tonight." Another text appeared, this one from Vanessa at Westbrook. "Winters Foundation called for reference. Gave you glowing review. Keep us posted." Ray put his phone away, feeling a strange mix of excitement and peace. The future wasn't certain, it never was. But for the first time in years, it felt full of music again. 6 months later, Ray stood in the wings of the elementary school auditorium, watching Penny adjust the bench in front of the upright piano on stage. The talent show had drawn a surprisingly large crowd, including Mrs. Chen, Mr. Patel, and several of Ray's new colleagues from the community music program, where he now taught 3 days a week. In the front row sat an unexpected guest, CEO Harrington himself, who had become something of a mentor to Ray in recent months. Beside him was Vanessa, who waved when she caught Ray's eye. And now, the principal announced, Penny Mercer will play an original composition called Dad's Sunrise, written by her father, Ray Mercer. As Penny began to play, Ray felt his throat tighten. The piece was one he'd written during the past few months, a companion piece to the lullaby, but brighter, more hopeful, looking forward instead of back. Penny played beautifully, her small hands confident on the keys, her face a picture of concentration. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Ray saw Harrington dabbing at his eyes again, not bothering to hide his emotion this time. After the show, as they gathered their things to leave, Penny tugged at Ray's sleeve. "Did I make you proud, Dad?" Ray knelt down to her level. Every single day, sunshine, but especially today. "Do you think Mom heard me play?" Ray looked at his daughter, so much like Diane, yet entirely her own person, and nodded. "I know she did." As they walked out into the evening, Harrington fell into step beside them. "Quite the musical family you two are becoming," he observed. Ray smiled. "We're figuring it out as we go. The best journeys often work that way." Harrington glanced down at Penny. "Your father's music is helping a lot of people, young lady. At the community center, at our corporate events, people who never knew they needed what he creates." Penny beamed. "He used to hide it," she said with a child's blunt honesty. "But not anymore." "No," Ray agreed, taking her hand. "Not anymore." They said goodbye to Harrington and continued home, their path lit by streetlights just beginning to glow in the dusk. Ray looked down at his hands. The same hands that had once mopped floors were now back to creating music, teaching others, and most importantly, building a new life with his daughter. The joke that had led him to play that first day at Westbrook had become the gift he never expected, a second chance at the dream he'd set aside, and the discovery that sometimes life's most beautiful melodies are the ones that follow after silence.